I ended my own life rather than be displayed as a trophy of war. I chose to die as a queen before living on my knees before Rome. And if you think you know my story, wait until you hear it from my own lips. Because what you have been told is barely the shadow of the truth. I am Cleopatra VII Philopator, last pharaoh of ancient Egypt, daughter of the gods and ruler of the Nile. This is my story, not the one my enemies invented, not the one the centuries distorted. Mine, the real one. I was born in the year 69 before Christ in Alexandria, the most magnificent city in the known world. A city of marble, papyrus, and philosophy, where Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, and people from every corner of the Mediterranean lived side by side. It was the intellectual beacon of the ancient world, and I grew up at its very center. The royal palace of the Ptolemies, the Greek dynasty that had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years. Many people assume I was Egyptian by blood. The truth is, I was Greek by lineage. A direct descendant of Ptolemy I, one of the most brilliant generals of Alexander the Great. But unlike every single one of my ancestors, I did something that none of them had bothered to do in nearly 3 centuries of ruling Egypt. I learned to speak Egyptian, and not just Egyptian. I mastered 9 languages: Ethiopian, Hebrew, Arabic, Persian, Latin, Greek, Demotic Egyptian, Coptic, and the language of the Parthians. 9 languages. Not one ruler of my dynasty before me had ever learned the tongue of their own people. I did it because I understood from a very young age that real power is not exercised through armies alone. It is exercised through words, through the ability to look someone in the eyes and speak to them in their own language. That single decision gave me more power than any army ever could. From childhood, I was educated at the Mouseion of Alexandria, the greatest intellectual center of the ancient world, connected to the Grand Library. I studied mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and medicine. I wrote treatises on botany, cosmetics, and the healing properties of the plants of the Nile. A future queen who studied science at night and politics by day. That is what Rome never wanted to admit about me. I was 18 years old when my father, King Ptolemy XII, died, and the throne of Egypt was left empty. According to Ptolemaic tradition, I was to rule alongside my younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. He was 10 years old. I was 18. But even before my father died, I already knew that ruling Egypt would not be simple. My own sister, Arsinoe, ambitious, ruthless, and watching from the shadows, eyed the throne with the same hungry gaze as I did. We were sisters by blood and rivals by destiny, from the moment we could understand what power meant. My brother's advisors, the eunuch Pothinus, the general Achilles, and the tutor Theodotus, did not want an intelligent, independent queen on the throne. They wanted me decorative, subordinate, silent, and when they understood that I would never be any of those things, they conspired against me. I was expelled from Egypt with a death sentence over my head. My own brother, barely 10 years old, signed my exile. I found myself alone in the desert, on the border between Egypt and Syria, with a small, loyal army and a throne that belonged to me but was held by someone else. Any sensible person might have given up. I did not, because at that very moment, something arrived in Alexandria that would change everything. Julius Caesar. Caesar was the most powerful man in Rome. He arrived in Alexandria chasing his rival Pompey. But Pompey was already dead, eliminated on the orders of my brother in a desperate attempt to win Rome's favor. When my brother's men presented Caesar with Pompey's head on a silver tray, Caesar wept, not from weakness, but because Pompey had been Roman. And no Roman deserved that end at the hands of a 10-year-old Egyptian king. That single gesture gave my brother exactly the opposite of what he had hoped for. I needed to reach Caesar, but the gates of Alexandria were sealed. My brother's men would have me killed the moment I tried to enter. So I did the only thing I could. I smuggled myself in. I rolled myself inside a linen sack, and a trusted man carried me into the palace as if I were nothing more than a bundle of goods. When the sack was opened before Julius Caesar, I was inside, alone. No army, no escort, only my intelligence, my determination, and the absolute certainty that if I could make that man listen to me, the world would change. What would you have thought in that moment if you had been Caesar? Would you have called the guards? Or would you have wanted to hear what that woman had to say? Caesar listened, and within hours he understood that the woman standing before him was not a desperate princess. She was the legitimate ruler of the richest nation in the Mediterranean, with a political mind as sharp as a blade. That night was the beginning of an alliance that would shake the known world. But what came next is something almost no one knows. Caesar and I sailed together along the Nile for nearly 2 months on a luxury vessel called the Thalamigos, a floating palace nearly 60 meters long, with gardens, dining rooms, and marble columns. We sailed from Alexandria all the way to the southern reaches of Egypt. Caesar discovered my country, its history, its temples, and its people. I showed him the real Egypt, not the one Romans imagined from afar. That journey transformed Caesar. He returned to Rome with a vision of the world he could never have had without me. But first, there were problems to solve. My brother, Ptolemy XIII, rebelled against Caesar and was defeated in battle. Fleeing across the Nile, he drowned under the weight of his own armor. My sister Arsinoe was captured. She had seized the chaos to proclaim herself queen, allying with Caesar's enemies and betraying her own family without a moment's hesitation. Caesar sent her to Rome as a prisoner and displayed her in chains during his triumphal parade. The Roman crowd reportedly felt pity for her, a young, proud princess dragging her chains through the streets, but I could not afford pity. Arsinoe, alive, was a permanent threat to my throne. I returned to rule Egypt alongside my youngest brother, Ptolemy XIV, who was barely 11 years old and entirely manageable. I was the real queen. He was simply a name on official documents, and I set about governing in earnest. Something history consistently forgets to mention is that I was an extraordinary administrator. I reformed Egypt's monetary system, stabilizing the currency my father had devalued to the point of disaster. I regulated the trade of grain, papyrus, and linen, the three great sources of Egypt's wealth. I built temples not only as acts of faith, but as powerful political statements of legitimacy. When a pharaoh built temples, the people saw them as a god on earth, and I needed the Egyptian people to see me exactly that way. My relationship with Caesar produced a son, Caesarion, whom I named Ptolemy Caesar, the son of the Queen of Egypt and the most powerful man in Rome. I traveled to Rome with Caesar and lived in his villa across the Tiber. And Caesar did something that left Rome speechless. He commissioned a golden statue of me, depicted as the goddess Isis, and placed it inside the temple of Venus Genetrix at the very heart of Rome. A golden statue of a living foreign queen inside a sacred Roman temple. Nothing like it had ever happened before. Rome erupted in outrage. Caesar did not remove it. That statue stood for centuries after my death. It was his way of telling Rome exactly who I was. Caesar was killed on the Ides of March in the year 44 before Christ, struck down by 23 blows inside the Senate. I returned to Egypt immediately, and shortly after, my brother Ptolemy XIV died suddenly. The circumstances were never fully explained. What was clear was that from that moment on, Caesarion became my only official co-regent. My son, the heir to two empires. I ruled Egypt alone, exactly as I had always intended. After Caesar's fall, power in Rome was divided between Octavian, Lepidus, and Mark Antony. Antony took control of the East. In the year 41 before Christ, he summoned me to the city of Tarsus to answer for my actions. It was a political meeting, a veiled interrogation. I decided I would not arrive as a vassal answering a summons. I would arrive as a queen. I sailed to Tarsus on a ship that was a spectacle in itself. Purple sails, silver oars striking the water to the rhythm of flutes and lyres, the scent of incense spreading across the river. I sat at the stern, dressed as Aphrodite, surrounded by boys costumed as Eros and women adorned as sea nymphs. Mark Antony waited in the city marketplace. When I arrived, every single person had abandoned their post and gone to the river to watch me pass. He was left standing alone in an empty square. That night, I dined with Mark Antony, and what began as politics became something neither of us had fully anticipated. Mark Antony was completely different from Caesar. Where Caesar was cold and calculating, Antony was passionate and impulsive. He drank with his soldiers, laughed without restraint, and loved life with an intensity that was almost exhausting. And he loved me with that same boundless intensity. We had 3 children together: Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus, and together We built a dream of colossal proportions, a great empire of the East that would challenge Rome itself. In a ceremony the Romans called the Donations of Alexandria, Mark Antony distributed vast territories among our children and publicly recognized Caesarion as King of Kings and the rightful heir of Julius Caesar. That was the point of no return. And then something happened that I had not entirely foreseen. My sister, Arsinoe, was killed. Mark Antony gave the order. She was found at the temple of Artemis in Ephesus, where she had lived in exile. She died on the temple steps. With her death, the last real threat to my throne from within my own family disappeared. But something else disappeared too. The last sister I ever had. History is complicated even when you win. Octavian understood that either he destroyed us or we would eventually destroy him. And he was a master of propaganda. He portrayed Mark Antony as a man corrupted and bewitched by an Eastern queen. He turned me into the villain of his story. The witch, the threat to Rome, and it worked. War came in the year 31 before Christ. The decisive battle was fought at sea, at Actium, off the coast of Greece. The battle was lost. Mark Antony and I retreated to Egypt, knowing that time was running out. And here I want to ask you something that has stayed with me for more than 2,000 years. If you had been in my place, with a kingdom collapsing, a love dying beside you, and an unstoppable enemy closing in, what would you have chosen to do? Because the options were few, and none of them were good. Octavian's forces advanced toward Alexandria. I attempted to negotiate with him. He promised clemency if I surrendered, but I knew exactly what that clemency meant. Being paraded through the streets of Rome in chains, humiliated before the very people who had always hated me. Octavian then spread the rumor that I had already died. Mark Antony believed it, and believing it, he made the decision that destroyed him. He ended his own life thinking I was no longer in this world. He was brought to me while still breathing. He died in my arms, inside my mausoleum, as Alexandria fell around us. When Octavian entered Alexandria, he found me alive. We had a long, cold conversation. He was courteous, calculating, unreadable. I understood perfectly what he was planning. His triumph in Rome required my presence in chains. I was the symbol of everything he had conquered. And so I made the only decision no one could take from me. The decision of my own ending. Before I died, I bathed, I perfumed myself, I dressed in my finest royal robes and placed Egypt's crown upon my head. I lay down on a golden bed, surrounded by my two most faithful servants, Eros and Charmian, who chose to die alongside me. I wanted whoever found me to see me exactly as I was, a queen, not a defeated woman. On the 12th of August in the year 30 before Christ, at 39 years of age, I ended my life. The most enduring image is that of the asp, the sacred serpent of the Nile, symbol of Egyptian royalty. In Egyptian tradition, its bite was the doorway to eternity and to becoming divine. A queen's death, not a prisoner's. Octavian found my body perfectly arranged, crown in place, expression serene. They say he wept, or perhaps he only pretended to weep. He gave me an honorable burial beside Mark Antony, exactly as I had requested. My son Caesarion was captured days later while attempting to flee south. He was killed. He was 17 years old. He was the last living bond between the dream of two worlds united. Octavian could not allow him to exist. With my death, 3,000 years of pharaonic Egypt came to an end. The civilization of the gods, the pyramids, the sacred Nile, the greatest library in human history, all of it became just another Roman province. But what Rome could never take from me was memory. More than 2,000 years have passed, and my name is still known in every corner of this world, in every language, in every culture. Because my story touches something that never grows old, the struggle of those who refuse to surrender in a world that does not want them there. Loyalty that goes beyond calculation, the choice to determine your own destiny when the world is determined to choose it for you. And now that you know my real story, the full one, the one Rome tried to bury under layers of propaganda and lies, I want to ask you one last thing. Do you think the world would have been different if Egypt had won that battle? Do you think the world was truly ready for a queen like me? I am Cleopatra, last pharaoh of Egypt, and although Rome believed it had erased me, here I remain, in every word of this story. In every mind that refuses to accept the simple version. In every person who understands that the greatest power is not found in swords, but in the truth that refuses to die.